You bring up Nate. Nate was our first guest this year for season 2, and it was right after he hadn't coached a game yet in Atlanta, and the turnaround he has authored down there is remarkable. He had success here. He had success at Portland. He had success in Indianapolis, and now in Atlanta. What made him good at this? I mean, you knew him in his early days as a coach. He probably was making some mistakes along the way. What was it that Nate was good at, though, right away in terms of coaching the NBA?
There's a stoicism and a steadiness to the message that Nate brings to any ball club. And of course, after Coach Westphal being dismissed and Nate taking over as the coach, Nate also had a tremendous right-hand man in Dwayne Casey, who had been in Seattle for years. And so Nate was, along with Dwayne Casey as the associate head coach, taking over things and learning from Dwayne a ton, along with Bob Weiss, who's basically an NBA lifer. And I remember Nate just trying to find his footing with that team and trying to make sure that the things that Gary and Vin had gotten away with in terms of Paul's accountability, that Nate was going to reel that in. And right. I don't think at his core, Gas, that part hasn't changed. And I think that's where Nate has found the most solid footing. You've known him for years. You know how great a father he is. You know how great a team player he was. And he's never really tried to be anything that he wasn't on the floor and off the floor. And the results speak for themselves. I think ultimately what happens is, people question, can Nate get creative around things and do things outside the box? Well, if you're looking for somebody like that, Nate McMillan is not your coach. But if you want somebody who's steady and you want somebody who backs up the things that he says and he's going to deliver the message constantly, then Nate McMillan is your kind of coach. And he's done an incredible job in Atlanta getting those guys to reverse their season in ways where there's a steadiness to the way they play.
What you just described there in a head coach, it got me thinking about another head coach. Now it's a little bit apples and oranges because the coach I'm thinking of has a fistful of championship rings he can hit you over the head with. But the guy you work for now, Gregg Popovich, some of those things, his steadiness. I don't know if I don't know how I'd describe him in terms of creativity. I don't know if you win championships the way he has without having some of that, but I don't think of Pop as big, dynamic, or he seems like a guy who is steady as she goes. So I think is there a similarity there in your mind?
Yeah, there is. I think Pop's a little bit more colorful with his language, and a little. He does have some levity, but I could say, Gas, having been around the NBA now for 14 years as a player, 10 years doing some broadcast work, and 3 years in the front office with the Spurs. There's just different types of messaging, and I think at their core, Nate and Pop are saying the same thing. I played for Pat Riley. Coach Riley would say the same thing. It's just the words that you use and sort of the temperament and maybe some of the dynamic ways in which you want to get that message across. And Pop has a just different way of delivering that. And a lot of that has to do with your players. If you are tapping into the personality of your players, where Nate has been in situations where it's been in Portland, young guys who were thought of to be stars, he had to make sure that they didn't go somewhere they shouldn't go. Much like this year in Atlanta with Trae Young, who maybe had run his line a little bit into the deeper waters, and Nate had to reel him back in. That's what he did. With Pop, you're talking about having Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, and this 3 pillars that you just rely on, where he had the breath to be able to get creative and say different messages because those guys knew where he was coming from, had spent so much time. And so that's where a coach can really differentiate themselves in terms of the messaging, the tone of their messaging, and then who it is that's carrying the water as players after you say what you say. And Nate hasn't had quite that kind of caliber of player along the line, maybe in Portland a little bit with, having the young LaMarcus Aldridge and then Brandon Roy and unfortunate injury stuff that went on. But that's what I would say is you kind of have to message it through your players, and they allow you to have that kind of levity or tone change.